Hi everyone, this is going to be my vampire crab tutorial video. I was going to do vampire crabs and red claw crabs as a combined tutorial video, but they're so different I decided that it would have to be a very long video if I did that, and it would be very confusing between the two species, so I decided to do it separately. So this is for the vampire crab, who you can see here looking absolutely beautiful. He's molted in the last couple of weeks, so he's going into hiding now. At least we got a few seconds of footage of him. I'm not going to disturb him again, but yeah, I'm just going to explain about his habitat and how I keep him. And yeah, so first of all, you'll need a terrarium. You don't need anything too extensive. I've just got one of the little, there's the lid, you can see what type of box it is, just a reptile. I think it's called a faunarium, this particular brand. And this is the kind of setup you ideally would want. You want water, you want enough water that it can go into the water and completely submerge itself, and have a little bit of room to walk around in there, and some hiding places as I've got there. But you don't need a great big tank full of water, contrary to popular belief. I mean, I've seen them in aquatic stores, and they're said to be a lot more aquatic than they actually are. This is a land crab that goes in water, rather than a water crab that comes up on the land. So it's worth remembering that. They do need to go into the water to molt, however. They need to be able to fully submerge themselves and have enough room to be able to molt in the water. And another thing regarding the water is you can't use normal tap water, because the chlorine and all the chemicals in the tap water will kill the crab, and I think that's a lot of the time why people fail when trying to keep these as exotic pets, is because they'll use normal tap water as a water source, and chemicals in that will kill off the crab quite quickly. Now, you can use RO water. RO water is ideal for this species, but most average exotics keepers don't have access to an RO system. You can buy it from your local fish store and then just bottle it up, but if you can't do that, you can just use, I seem to be doing quite well with just aged tap water. But what I mean by that is I'll bottle it up in just some bottles that I salvaged from the recycling. So I've got 2 bottles worth, and I'll just leave it for a few days before I put it in the bowl. And by leaving it, it starts to age and neutralises some of the chemicals over time. So that's what I do. It's the same thing we seem to do at college for the frogs that we've got at college. Yeah, but if you can use RO water, do, but that's an alternative. So go on to the land section of the substrate. You need lots of hiding places, because this species of crab will spend most of its time in hiding. As we've just seen, it's gone into its little, this is its favourite shelter, this big bark piece. And I would also suggest some plant cover, because these crabs come from riverbeds. There's a lot of plants along the riverbeds, so I've put in some fake plants. You can use real plants, by all means. If you want to do an extensive setup for this species, you can use real plants. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. Just be aware that the crab is omnivorous and may nibble certain plant species. And then for the substrate, it's looking a bit saturated at the moment because I've just sprayed the tank, but for the substrate I just use cocoa fibre, which is also, I think cocoa fibre and coir are the same thing, possibly not, but yeah, I use that stuff. You can just use soil as well. You could use soil. I wouldn't use sand. I tried having a sandy area for a while in this terrarium, and the crab just wouldn't go on the sandy area very much, so I wouldn't use sand too much. Then I've used moss, as you can see, that's sphagnum moss, just to keep the humidity up. I use sphagnum moss over most of the floor of the terrarium, to be honest. You do need a very high humidity at all times for this species. They depend on a very high humidity. If you let your humidity get too low, then the crab will die. I mean, you can see here I've got my hygrometer there, and you can see it's clocking at just about 78. It should be a bit more than that, really, but the tank hasn't warmed up yet, so it will be a bit more than that. And speaking of heat, you do need a heat source. So you can use a heat mat. By all means, use a heat mat. I wouldn't use a heat lamp, because I think they like to be in the dark. So I wouldn't use a heat lamp unless you've got one of those ceramic bulbs that only emit heat and not light. You could also use a heat cable. That's another option as well. If you've got a particularly big tank, use a heat cable. or if you want to have your tank heated by the same thing that heats all your other tanks, you can have more than a line and just use a heat cable. But what I do as my heat source, bit makeshift I know, but I just pop him on top of my fish tank, and the warmth from the light bulb will maintain the tank at about 28 to 32, I think, degrees. Possibly a bit lower than that sometimes, but I've seen it at 30 before, definitely. Not sure of the exact temperatures, to be completely honest. I haven't taken much notice of the thermometer. I just know the tank is very warm, because when you put your hand in there you can feel the warmth when it's been sat on there for a while. So yeah, just find a heat source. Any reptile heat source will do, apart from a heat lamp that emits a light, because they seem to like the darkness more. So yeah, just keep the terrarium nice and warm for this species, because that in turn will keep the humidity up, which is always nice for this species. They love the humidity. So that's the terrarium. I've used pieces of wood as hiding places. That seems to work very well. I like to keep a thermometer and a hygrometer in there, just so I know what temperature the tank's at and what humidity the tank's at, in case it gets too cold or too dry. Moving on to diet, as you can see, I've got some medium small silent brown crickets, and the crab seems to like munching on those. So I like to keep the tank stocked with them so that it can always hunt if it wants to, but not hundreds of them, because I think that would just stress the crab out too much if there were hundreds of crickets in there. So I've just got a few. I think I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Can't see any others. Might be some others hiding. But when I see the cricket count is getting a bit low, I'll just put in some more crickets. I used to use, before the crab molted, I used to use a very small pinhead crickets, and then it molted and grew, so I moved up to medium small, which is the next size up from the small crickets, and he seems to be enjoying those. In addition to that, you can feed crab pellets. I'll get my crab pellets so I can show you. So this is the one I use. Crab pellets over crabs, and you can put those in as well. I haven't had an awful lot of success with these with the vampire crab though. He seems to like crickets a lot better. And I know as well as that, they're omnivorous, so you can feed fruits. In my personal experience, both the vampire crabs that I have owned have, both this one and the one I had before that sadly didn't last very long, they'll eat fruit but not vegetables. I've tried carrot, it wasn't interested in carrot. I've tried lettuce, wasn't interested in lettuce. I tried raspberry and they've both liked raspberry. Although I think it's certain fruits, because I tried a cherry with this one and he wasn't that enamoured with it. Took a couple of bites and that was it really. Didn't want the cherry very much. But yeah, that's about all there is to say really. Yeah, that's about it really for the vampire crab. So I just wanted to make this video just to give a little bit of an insight into how I keep my vampire crab. Yeah, that's it really. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.